Today's amplifiers seem to be a contest to see who can have the most amount of features, whether it be USB inputs, extremely complicated MIDI switching, or just sheer amount of channels. It was really nice to play another one of Orange's instant classics, the OR100. This thing doesn't even have words on the front panel for the EQs. It has pictures, which I love, which is a obvious tribute to the 70s amps that they originally put out. This amp is awesome. The dirty channel, I think, is more of a harken to classic 70s tones, but with a kind of a modern twist. This may not make sense to a lot of you younger folks, but this amp reminds me a lot of the tones that the 90s bands got with their vintage Oranges, which in a lot of cases they were playing OR130s and such. I'm talking about bands like Hum and Failure, those kinds of bands. Really gritty, gnarly tones that are still controlled and tight. I always think of distortion in terms of grain. For example, a metal zone, I always think of having the grain of like sand. It's just really like, This is more like cornflakes as far as grain goes, if that makes any sense. And if it doesn't, I apologize for my stupid analogies. However, this thing sounds like the 70s, but it has a modern feel to it, if that makes sense. You can still palm mute, and the palm mutes don't get lost in like a wash of fuzz, but it's still crunchy enough to really just be this massive bombastic thing, which I absolutely love. I can't believe this thing only has 4 EL34s for the output section. This is by far one of the loudest damn amps I have ever played in my life. And it's also one of the heaviest. I would estimate this thing to be over 60 pounds. I wouldn't be surprised if it was heavier than 70. It was honestly that heavy. I can't believe what they've packed into this. It's simplicity at its finest. As far as the heavy stuff, all you kids usually ask me, oh, can it do brutal metal? No, this cannot do death metal, and that is not what Orange is aiming for. And if you are looking at an Orange for death metal, look elsewhere, because that's not what this does. But if you're in a 3-piece band and you really need to thicken up your live sound, because you are the only guitarist, this is definitely the amp to check out. This kind of falls in between the Thunderverb and the Rockerverb, in my opinion. The Thunderverb is just brutality, I think, being 200 watts. The Rockerverb is obviously like a more modern take on a vintage flavor. Obviously Jim Root from Slipknot has his own signature Lunchbox amp, which is the preamp of the Rockerverb, which is one of my favorite amps that Orange has ever made. This is definitely up there. I would like this. I would prefer this over a Rockerverb. I don't know why. I can't really tell you any specifics. I like the feel of this amp a lot. The clean channel is a volume and a bass and treble, and that's it. And I love that. At any rate, Orange OR100. And for more information, check out the Orange website in the description. And as always, thanks for watching.